networks inventory is an assessment and planning tool which highlights the significant impact that communication partners play in interactions with people who have complex communication needs, specifically those who rely heavily on the use of AAC devices. This tool uses a person-centered approach by involving family and friends into the process of goal setting and intervention planning. It highlights that communication is multimodal and that communication patterns will likely vary across social interactions and with different individuals.
The tool identifies communication partners within 5 concentric circles with the person with complex communication needs at the center. The first circle identifies the person's lifelong communication partners, likely their family or their spouse. The second circle identifies close friends and relatives. The third circle identifies acquaintances. The fourth circle, paid workers, likely therapists or teachers. And finally, the fifth circle, unfamiliar partners. That means everyone else. The tool allows for the identification of important interactants in the individual's life. Also, circles where partners may be lacking and partners who could benefit from training. The questions focus on providing information about the skills and abilities in various areas of functioning, as well as current methods of expression and strategies and how they are currently working with different communication partners.
It takes at least 1 hour to interview each informant. Responses are collected and summarized in the inventory booklet. There should be at least 2 informants, 1 lifelong communication partner from the AAC users Circle 1 and 1 paid worker from Circle 4. The interviewer needs to have a solid understanding of the social networks framework and should read the manual thoroughly before conducting the interviews. Ideally, if possible, the AAC user themselves will be interviewed too. Because social networks is a questionnaire, there is no scoring involved, and the informant's answers can be summarized in the back of the inventory booklet.
For example, Sarah Jane is a 12-year-old girl in grade 7 and is fully integrated into her classroom. Her diagnosis includes developmental delay and motor and visual impairments. Sarah Jane's mother from Circle 1 and her educational assistant from Circle 4 were interviewed and agreed that Sarah Jane is currently an emerging communicator since she doesn't yet have a reliable method of symbolic expression.
Summary Sheet A provides a visual representation of Sarah Jane's circles of communication partners. We see that Sarah Jane has a number of people in Circles 1 and 4, few acquaintances in Circle 3, and 0 people in Circles 2, that is, close friends, or 5, unfamiliar people. We also have information about Sarah Jane's preferred, most skilled, and most frequent communication partners.
Summary Sheet B outlines the methods of communication Sarah Jane uses that are effective and not effective. As an emerging communicator, she does not have a reliable use of speech, sign, or symbols. She does, however, communicate somewhat with gestures. We can see that her use of gesture is effective with people in Circle 1, but not with people in Circle 4. Similarly, the people in Circle 4 have been using a simple AAC device with Sarah Jane at school, but her family members were not using this device at home or in her community. Sheet C summarizes Sarah Jane's skills in language and related areas. That is, that Sarah Jane has a severe impairment in all language areas as well as visual, motor, and cognitive impairments. We also have information about the types of representational strategies and selection techniques she uses. In this case, Sarah Jane effectively uses idiosyncratic manual signs with her mouth, body, and fingers. We also know that she uses these effectively most of the time with her mom in Circle 1, but not with her EA in Circle 4. We also have information about what supports Sarah Jane's language expression and comprehension and the topics of conversation she currently uses, as well as those she would like to use.
Summary Sheet D of social networks allows us to sum up areas of need and highlight the relevant findings for each circle. We've been able to identify important interactants in Sarah Jane's life, the circles where partners are currently lacking, and the partners who could benefit from training. From this, we've identified that Sarah Jane could benefit from having more communicative partners that are close friends in Circle 2, acquaintances in Circle 3, and unfamiliar partners in Circle 5. We can also see that Sarah Jane's mom, sister, and EA are her most familiar and skilled communication partners. Finally, we've determined that all of Sarah Jane's communicative partners could work together to develop Sarah Jane's gestures into a more productive symbolic gestural system. As a first step, the gestures that Sarah Jane uses at home with her mom could be shared to her EA and to her teachers and classmates. From these summarized results, we can determine functional goals for Sarah Jane that reflect her perceptions and preferences and her key communication partners. Sarah Jane's goals are as followed. Sarah Jane will use a talking switch to interact more directly and often with her peers at school and with people in her apartment building. Sarah Jane will increase the use of symbolic gestures with staff and family members. Sarah Jane will increase the number of people in her second, third, and fifth circles from baseline to at least 2 additional people in at least 2 contacts over the next 6 months.
When comparing the communication matrix and the social networks inventory, we found that both tools are non-standardized tools that examine the how and why individuals with complex communication needs communicate. They both include all forms of AAC, starting from the pre-linguistic stage. The social networks inventory is a questionnaire-based tool, while the communication matrix is an observation-based tool. The communication matrix is primarily targeted towards children, however, can be used on any individual functioning at the early stages of communication or using forms other than reading or writing. The SNI, on the other hand, is targeted equally towards both adults and children. In respect to cost, the communication matrix is actually available free of charge online, while the SNI is available to purchase online for around $90. One main differing factor that is noteworthy for clinicians is that the social networks inventory also provides information around the social environments and interlocutors that an individual interacts in or with. This is not inclusive in the communications matrix.
As mentioned earlier, the social networks inventory is not a standardized tool and it does not report any psychometric properties. So we were unable to find any information regarding its reliability or validity as an assessment. However, this lack of empirical support is not uncommon for assessments in the field of AAC, and in the manual, the authors of the SNI state that it is not intended to be used as an objective or quantitative measure of communication, and instead, it should be used to gather qualitative information of the informant's perceptions of the individual's communication networks and patterns. In their position paper on the role for SLPs in the field of AAC, Speech, Language, and Audiology Canada cited the Social Networks Inventory as a framework for assessment, and it aligns with the SAC's assertion to consider a client's language development and goals across their various environments and communication partners. The Social Networks Inventory also has utility as a tool in other research in 2 broad ways. First, as a pre- and post measure to assess the effects of intervention, and second, to measure differences between groups in terms of their social networks. It has been used in research to study the social networks of people with intellectual disability, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, and acquired brain injuries such as aphasia.